All right, share with you here, see what they got for the standard deviation and check out their curve to make sure they have something similar to yours. Now, mind you, some are a little bit of artistically challenged, but that's okay. All right, to get us started, I need the mean. Who's got the mean? Volunteer? Devin? 5.6? 5.6. 5.6, hands if you got that. That's about right. All right, so standard deviation. Pass the one, Devin. Andrew, what'd you get? 1.5? 1.5. Hands if you got that, approximately. Yes. All right. And of course, once you sketch your standard deviation, tell your neighbor the average of that data, please. The average range. All right. From where to where? Jet, go. Jet. From 3 to what? Sorry? Okay, 4.1 to 7.1. Yeah. Hands if you got something like that. Yeah. All right. Copy the agenda for today. Warm up number 23, observation and experimental studies. We're going to finish off that session, and that pretty much is going to close our chapter 1. There's one more session in that chapter in regards to computers and calculators, but I don't want to spend that much time on that because they go over the TI-84 and other things. But like I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't want you guys to go out and buy a new calculator. So we're going to be using computer.net to do our calculations there. And hopefully that'll get us through the course. And the rest of it, you know me, I'm more of a kind of like pen and paper type of person, pencil and paper. So I like to see the work. All right, so your home plate for tonight, page 24, numbers 1 through 18, evens only. Numbers 1 through 18, evens only. Now, the only home plate that you took over the weekend was to get your signed progress, is that correct? Yes? All right. So make sure you go to Canvas, turn that in. I left it open till 3:25 today, so that gives you plenty of time. Okay, we good? Yes, Mr. Q. There's no Nearpod code today. There wasn't any home plate aside from the signature. And once again, your home plate for tonight, page 24, numbers 1 through 18, evens only. All right, got a Cornell note ready, please. Today we have a lot to cover in regards to some terminology that I need to clarify that we started with last week. We'll finish off today. And we're only gonna do one example just so that we can bring everything to a close. But yeah, you're gonna need your colored pens if you have them, highlighters, and loosen up your wrists because we have a lot to write about today. FYI, BTW. I'll give you guys time to set up. All right, our objective for today, I can identify statistical studies. I can identify statistical studies. So as you remember last week, we started with the 2 studies that we practiced here in class. But we've been talking about statistics throughout chapter 1 already and the first weeks of school. We looked at different representations. We know what it is, we know what it's not, and what we're looking for throughout the course. So the two studies that we talked about were observational and experimental. So before we move on, just talk it over to your neighbor, let them know, remind them once again, what is an observational study and what is an experimental study, just to make sure we got it. Observational study, experimental. All right. All right, Jet, pass someone. Matthew, what's an observational study? Say that again. I couldn't hear. There's no variable. So basically it's just observing and just stating the facts, whatever it is that you're observing, whether it's a study in the past that you look through some data or something that you actually sit down to look straight through. Pass someone. Experimental. What's an experimental study? One that has a variable, I heard? Yes? Yes, and also the experimental is the one that has something that is being manipulated in regards to the study, okay? So with that said, let's talk more in regards to the observational and experimental, but I'm gonna focus on observational. So I want you to copy this table. Here we go. Don't close it at the bottom because we have stuff to write in there. So there's three most common observational studies. One that's called cross-sectional. That's when you have a study on a single point in time. I call it a snapshot type of study. You take a snapshot of a certain episode and you just do the study on that. The second one is a retrospective. A retrospective study is when you go specifically to the past. And I don't know if you guys noticed in these past years, they did a lot of reference to back almost 100 years ago when the first pandemic hit here in the US. I don't know if you guys saw any of those pictures where back in 1918, when people were wearing some masks back in those days, and they did some studies or they went back to get data from there. That's a retrospective study. And the third one is a longitudinal study. A longitudinal study is a study that's done over a period of time. So if I was to ask you guys to do a study on whatever it might be that interests you guys, you start it today, and I'm gonna say, keep studying and keep recording data for the next month. So that's a longitudinal study because it requires a certain period of time in order to complete it, okay? So write that down. Those are the three most common observational studies: cross-sectional, retrospective, longitudinal. Now, advantages in regards to observational. Number one, it's usually in natural settings. So kind of like that example I gave you guys last week that I was gonna sit down over there by the airport just to observe cars speeding through the 45-mile-an-hour section. It cannot be manipulated. So basically you're just recording from what you see or from the study that you get, and it's already done. So you just record what you are given in regards to facts. And observational also, you can use special circumstances that maybe might be inappropriate in other, if you bring those topics up in another circumstances. Kind of like, let's say if we were to do a study on, I don't know, drug use. When you're talking about drug use, now you're talking about ethics, and it might involve that maybe we can't do that with students that are less than certain years, because that might get into some issues with legalities and such. But observational, if you have already the data, you can go around those special circumstances and so on and so forth. Now, what are disadvantages? Disadvantages in regards to the observational studies is that you cannot show cause and effect. You can only record facts from what you see or from what you get. The other disadvantage is that it's expensive and time consuming. And the last one, there's some inaccuracy in some studies because some of it depends on other people's data. So if I was to ask you to do a retrospective observational study, think about that one. Retrospective, what does that mean? You have to go to some past records, right? Which means you have to depend on someone else's data in order for you to do that observational study, okay? So those are the disadvantages. So pretty straightforward, observational, yeah? Yes, Mr. Q. All right, let's go to experimental. Experimental studies are also known as scientific studies. Now, what's so special about experimental scientific studies is the fact that everything has to be done in an organized way. And when they select the subjects and the groups, it has to be in a random way, in a random form. Why? In order to make the study more of a clean study. The second type of experimental study is the quasi-experimental study. So the scientific or experimental study, when they pick subjects, it's random and you select also random groups, whereas quasi-experimental, the subject and the groups are intact, meaning that you just go with whatever you are given. If you are given these subjects, that's what you're going with. You don't select the subjects at random and you don't place them in groups at random. You're already given the subjects and the groups, such as if we were to do a study here on campus and I said, you know what, we're gonna select all the classes, so that's already given. We can't randomize them or anything. We're gonna use all of them. Advantages of experimental scientific studies is that they can be manipulated, or variables can be manipulated, meaning when you introduce something, it might cause an effect into the study. And that's why we have cause and effect. This is the type of study that we want in order to see a cause and effect on a particular study. Also, it's a smaller and shorter versus the observational. And one that I didn't write in there is that it's also more, how can I say, more accurate in regards to your cause and effect because of the fact it's done in a controlled environment most of the time, controlled environment. Disadvantages. Once again, it's still expensive, time consuming. And these are usually not in the natural setting. These are usually conducted inside a controlled environment, whether it's a lab, whether it's a enclosed place, in order to see and have more of immediate proximity with a study. At times, some of the practices could be unethical in regards to some of the questions or some of the variables being brought in. Also, when some of the variables I introduce, at times the researchers can bring their personal biases into some of these studies. And that's when all of a sudden the results can be skewed in regards to that. They can't really be applied to a lot of situations because of that bias. And last but not least, it can bring something that we call the Hawthorne effect. Hawthorne effect. In a quick snippet, the Hawthorne effect is a study that was given some time back, and when the subjects or the people that were involved in the study knew or found out that they were going to be in the study, they changed the way they acted throughout the study. So it's kind of like this. I don't know if it's happened to you guys. I know it doesn't happen here in my class, but in other classes, you know, sometimes you get to some classes that are very loud. I don't know if it's happened to you. And then all of a sudden when Mr. Apodaca or somebody drops in to go and observe, all of a sudden everybody gets quiet. Have you guys noticed that? That's something similar to a Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect is it creates an effect on the outcome of the study because people all of a sudden change the way they approach whatever they're doing because they know that they are in a study. Okay. All right, so those are the two. I just wanted to get through those two studies. Like I said, we started last week. Hopefully that gives you a little bit more of a thorough definition in regards to what each one is. But I do want to focus on experimental studies. Here we go. Experimental. In experimental studies, they usually have two groups. One of them is the treatment group, and that group receives special instruction or is being manipulated by a variable. And the second group is called a control group. So if the first one is a treatment group that receives special instructions, what do you think the control group is? Very good, good participation. A group that does not receive special instruction, oh my goodness. So once again, the first one, the treatment, does receive it. The control group does not receive it. And that's usually how studies go, guys, whenever you are trying to figure out why this is a result of something that's going on around us. They try to have two groups, one that's being the treatment group, the one that is given like a phrase or a statement or they see something that's going to make them react in a certain way. And the control group is the one that is not given any instructions or shown anything that's going to change the way that they are seeing things around them. So it's more of a natural group. All right. Now, in regards to manipulated variable. Now, variables, just to reiterate on those, variables is what is being introduced to the study. Now, the other day that I gave the example in regards to observing the cars going by right there by the airport, who remembers what made that situation change? What did I do to make that situation change? Yes, JC. Yeah, I put a neon sign saying speed radar, right? So that is what we call a variable. When you introduce something that's going to cause that experiment to change. So in that regard, that variable is what I call a independent variable. The independent variable is what is introduced to create or to see if we create a response. So when I did the radar gun and the sign saying that I had a radar gun, what did we say we thought was going to happen to the people going by? That they were going to slow down. Is that correct? All right. Now, there's also something that we call the dependent variable. The dependent variable is the outcome that we that is introduced to see if the cause and effect that we did with the independent actually worked to get an outcome. Now, in that regard, in regards to me with a radar gun, maybe in a dependent variable would be if I was to send a survey to the people that drive by Imperial and ask them to answer the question, do you consider the section there between Broken Yoke all the way to Imperial to be a slow section? And they were going to answer according to whatever they saw. what we call a dependent variable, dependent. Now, the independent is something that we introduce that's going to cause or that might cause an effect, and the dependent is the outcome. But there's something that we call confounding variable, confounding variable. A confounding variable is the one that influences the dependent, but might not be accounted for. For example, at that time when I saw people driving, one of the things that's going to affect my study is maybe age. Let me ask you guys, who do you think drives the fastest? Older people or younger people? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Younger people, right? So one thing that I didn't take in consideration was age. So that's what we call a confounding variable that might create something that's going to change in my study. So independent, are we clear what independent variable is? What we introduce, such as the neon sign and me saying that I have a radar gun. The dependent variable might be a little survey that I send people driving by Imperial to see if that corridor is slow. And the confounding variable is what influences the dependent, but might not be accounted for, such as age or other factors that people might have had once they drove through Imperial. All right. So I think that's pretty much the last part of that last section of our chapter 1. So I'm going to give you right now a study, and I'm going to ask you some questions from it. So here we go. Don't copy this. And it reads, researchers randomly assign 10 people to 3 different groups. Group 1 was instructed. Whoa, can you mute yourself, guys? Whoever unmuted. Thank you. Researchers randomly assigned 10 people to 3 different groups. Group 1 was instructed to write an essay about the hassles of life. Group 2 was instructed to write an essay about circumstances that made them feel thankful. And group 3 was instructed to write an essay about events they felt neutral about. After the exercise, they were given a questionnaire on their outlook of life. Conclusion: focusing on positive makes you more optimistic about life in general. Okay, here goes the first question. What kind of study was this? Talk to your neighbor, let them know why you're saying that's the type of study. There's only 2 types, right? Yeah, tell your neighbor what type of study that is and why. All right. Let's see, I think Amy's got this one. Amy, what type of study is this? I'm sorry? Experimental. Tell your neighbor what word made you think experimental, guys. Yeah, very good. The word random, randomly, right? When you select subjects and groups in random, it has to be experimental. Okay, next. What is the independent variable? Talk it over your neighbors, look through that situation, let them know what the independent variable is. Amy, pass someone. Jet, what was the independent variable, do you think? You ever hear that? He said that they were instructed to write an essay. The essay is the actual thing that they brought in for them to have some sort of effect. Notice the instructions for the essay on all three of them had those instructions, right? Instructed to write an essay, instructed to write an essay, instructed to write an essay. That's going to be our independent variable. Now, why was it independent? Let's see. What was the first group going to write about? Instructed to write about what? Hassles. How about the second group? Circumstances that made them thankful. And how about the third group? Write about what? Neutral. So those three are the independent variable. Okay. What is the dependent variable? Talk to other neighbors, see if they can identify the dependent variable. All right. Jet, pass someone. What's that? The essay was the independent. So what was the dependent? The questionnaire, yes, the questionnaire is the dependent variable. Let's go. You left Maddie hanging. Yes, that is correct, because that's gonna measure our outcome to see if the questions or the essays, the topic, made them, respond differently. What can you say about sample size? Talk it over your neighbor. Sample size, what can you say about it? Talk it over. Aaron, pass someone. Who? Samuel, sample size. I'm sorry? All three groups, okay. So that's one response, I'll take that. But what else can you tell us about sample size in all three groups? Pass someone. Pedro? Sample size. Can you give us a count? How many? Yes, 10 times 3, that's 30. Very good. That's 3 groups, 10, 30. All right. And last but not least, do you agree with the conclusion of that study? Conclusion, focusing in positive makes you more optimistic about life in general. Talk it over with your neighbor and see what they think about that conclusion. Do you agree with that conclusion? Yeah, she's over. Cheney. All right. So, do you agree with the conclusion? Pass someone, Pedro. Vince, what do you think? You agree with it? Why do you say that? Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, he said, because if you focus on the negative, then you might not have a positive outcome. Okay, I'll take that. All right, guys. So like I said, we were only going to go over one of them. Now, I noticed as we were talking about this, some of you are still not clear in regards to independent variable and dependent variable. So if you have colors underlined, I'm going to use, let's see, I'm going to start with blue. Let me move this out of the way. So with blue, underline where it says, write an essay about the hassles, write an essay about thankful, and write an essay about something that you felt neutral. That's an independent variable, independent. I'm sorry? So good question. Confounding variables. Let's see, think about it. What do you think might affect this study that was not accounted for as a variable? Think about it. What might affect this study? Talk it with your neighbor. Well, what might affect this study? So confounding, what might affect it? Let's see. How about Andres? What might affect the study that was not accounted for in there? What do you think? Something that might affect it, but that wasn't really said or anything in there, but could be part of people and the way they respond. The what? I'm sorry? I can't hear. Essay? No. That's the independent. Marco? Outlook? The person's outlook? Yeah, so Marco said that each person's going to have a different outlook, but what's going to cause that outlook? How about, look up, guys, how about age? You think age? Yeah, because I read Maddie's brain. I'm a Jedi master. Do you think age might have to do with how they answer those essays? Because some of us that have more experience in life in regards to some of the downs or ups in life might have more to write about in certain of these questions. So that could be a confounding variable. Last but not least, in green, dependent variable, make sure you just underline, it says they were given a questionnaire. They were given a questionnaire. Okay. All right, I'm gonna stop right there. So once again, your home play for tonight, guys, make sure you go to page 24, numbers 1 through 18 events. It's basically gonna be this. There's a couple of things that I did not address from that section, but just read into the unit as you answer the questions, and I'll stop the video right there.